What happens when the head of the FBI posts a photo of a sitting judge's arrest? Senator Chris Van Hollen called out Director Kash Patel, saying this could violate DOJ policy and undermine the presumption of innocence. This isn't just a tweet. It's about how power shapes public perception before a trial even begins.
Senator Merkley raised on the Constitution because, as you know, in response to a question that the president was asked about whether he had to comply with the Constitution, he said, and I'm quoting, "I don't know." So it is important that we reaffirm everybody's obligation to comply with the Constitution, and I appreciate that was your answer broadly to the question asked by Senator Merkley. But you don't dispute the fact, and I'm quoting here from the Supreme Court opinion in Reno v. Flores, where Justice Scalia wrote, and I quote, "It is well established that the Fifth Amendment entitles aliens to due process of law in deportation proceedings," end of quote. You don't dispute that?
I don't dispute that.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure, for the record, we understand that, because as you well know, the federal courts have found that there have been gross violations to date of many individuals' due process rights. Let me ask you a question about Judge Dugan, and I'm not going to get into about Judge Dugan, who was arrested, taken out in handcuffs from her courtroom. You agree that as director of the FBI, you should lead by example, right?
Try to.
Okay. Well, there's a confidentiality and media contacts policy within the Department of Justice guidelines that says specifically that DOJ personnel should not voluntarily disclose a photograph of a defendant unless it serves a law enforcement function or unless the photograph is already part of the public record in the case. Clearly, Judge Dugan's photograph was not already part of the public record in the case. So it appears that what you did was a violation of that policy, unless you can express a clear law enforcement purpose for having done that.
The simple law enforcement purpose is to show America that we investigate any individual who commits a crime, especially those in positions of public trust.
But do you agree with the presumption of innocence in the U.S. system?
Absolutely. As a public defender, that's what I fought for years. Well, but that's different than this.
But Mr. Director, this is one of the reasons why that guideline is there, so people, especially the director of the FBI, doesn't announce to the country that somebody's already been found criminally liable when they haven't. She hasn't, has she?
But that's not what we said, that she was criminally liable. We said she was arrested and showed it.
Yeah, we know she was arrested, but the issue is the photograph. I'm asking you, going forward, I hope as the leader of the FBI, you will comply with the guidelines of the FBI that everybody else is expected to follow.
I believe I have, and I will going forward.
Well, this seems like a direct violation of this guideline.
I guess we're in disagreement, Senator.
Well, unless you can tell me why that really serves a law enforcement function. So you're going to send out pictures of everybody that's arrested?
Lots of people that are arrested have pictures sent out.
I'm asking you as director of the FBI, is that going to be your policy, just to start saying?
No, we do it on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah. Well, the guidelines make clear that I think any normal interpretation of this suggests it's a violation. Look, we're a budget committee, an appropriations committee. We want to find a way to make sure that we properly resource the men and women who work at the FBI. I think that is a common goal, I hope. And I do, just, Mr. Chairman, again, in closing, I understand you want to proceed, just so that we keep things going, but it is kind of hard to proceed without any budget. So.
I don't take you as critiquing our having a hearing.
No,
you're pleased to have a hearing, and I wish we had more to deal with than we do.
I do.
And
when Senator Chris Van Hollen confronted FBI Director Kash Patel over that now infamous tweet, the one showing the photo of a Wisconsin judge being arrested, it wasn't just about optics. It was about principle. It was about how the most powerful law enforcement agency in America chooses to wield its influence, and what that says about the health of our democracy. You see, in America, the presumption of innocence isn't just a technicality, it's one of the most sacred pillars of our legal system. It's the idea that the government must prove guilt, not the accused prove innocence. It's what separates a free society from one where people are condemned by perception alone. So when the head of the FBI, an institution already under immense scrutiny and political pressure, publicly posts an arrest photo of a sitting judge, that isn't a neutral act. It's a performance. It's a message. It's saying, look, we're tough. We hold people accountable. But accountability without due process isn't justice. It's spectacle. Van Hollen understood that. That's why he pressed Patel on the Department of Justice's own media contact policy, a policy that explicitly forbids releasing such images unless it serves a clear law enforcement purpose. Patel couldn't point to one. Instead, he claimed it was to show the public that no one is above the law. But here's the problem. When government officials use images of handcuffed people, especially public figures, to make a political or moral point, they're not reinforcing trust in the system. They're manipulating it. They're shaping public opinion before a trial ever happens. And that matters, because in today's digital world, a photo is not just a record, it's a weapon. Once that image goes online, it's shared, memed, distorted, and recycled across the internet. By the time the truth comes out, if it ever does, the narrative is already set in stone. This is where the conversation goes beyond this one incident. What we're really seeing is how law enforcement and political power are increasingly blending with media culture, using the tools of publicity to control perception. When justice becomes something that plays out online rather than in a courtroom, it erodes the foundation of fairness itself. And Van Hollen's frustration wasn't just procedural, it was moral. Because if the FBI director can't follow his own agency's code of conduct, what message does that send to the rank-and-file agents? What message does it send to the public? That the rules apply to everyone except those in power? That justice is whatever makes the right people look good? This moment was a reminder of how fragile public trust really is. The FBI doesn't just enforce laws, it embodies them in the public's eyes. Its credibility isn't built on power, but restraint, on knowing when not to use force, when not to go public, when not to turn someone's humiliation into a headline. Because if the people in charge of upholding justice are more interested in controlling the narrative than upholding the truth, then we've crossed a dangerous line, one where institutions meant to protect democracy start performing for it instead. And it's not just about Kash Patel. This is part of a larger pattern where political officials, agencies, even prosecutors increasingly blur the line between justice and publicity. It's about how power uses visibility as a weapon. And in that context, Van Hollen's questioning wasn't just about a tweet, it was about accountability itself. He was saying, in essence, if you believe in the Constitution, you can't pick and choose when it applies. You don't get to weaponize someone's image for credibility points. You don't get to erode due process to score PR wins. Because once that line is crossed, it's not just one judge's reputation that's damaged, it's the entire system's integrity. So yes, this hearing might not have gone viral. It didn't have shouting or fireworks, but it cut to something even more fundamental. The quiet ways democratic values are eroded not by chaos, but by normalization. By people in suits, behind microphones, saying it's just transparency. But transparency without ethics isn't transparency, it's manipulation. And that's why this moment matters, because it forces us to ask, in a society drowning in imagery, who controls what justice looks like? Who decides which arrests are celebrated and which are hidden? And when the state starts curating that narrative, are we still a democracy, or are we just an audience watching power perform itself? That's what Chris Van Hollen was really getting at. This wasn't about one photo. It was about how far the line has already moved and how much further it might go if we stop paying attention. If you value this kind of breakdown, the kind that cuts through political theater and goes straight to the principles that define our democracy, then make sure to like this video, subscribe to Left Lens, and hit that notification bell. Because here, we don't just show you what happened, we show you why it matters.